I remember back when I was in high school, we had a theater class that students were required to take, and I think it was our freshman year. And one of the exercises that our teacher would have us do during the theater class was they would give us some object. It would be some item, and we would have to think of different ways to use the item as a prop in a show, or different ways to use the item in some improv way. So for example, they might give us like an orange traffic cone, and we have to come up with different ways to use that improv. And so the first thing that people would think of usually would be like pretend like they were directing traffic with it, like put it down. Then some people would put it on their heads. They would pretend to use it as like a t-ball stand, and so on and so on. They would spend probably about 5 minutes going through different ways to use that as a prop. And what I remember most about that was all of the cool creative ideas for these props were always used at the end. The first few items were the very cliched sort of regular ways you would use it in a prop, the ways you'd seen it like 100 times on a stage, or seen it in movies used before. All of the interesting new stuff, the ones that sort of made you laugh, in the props that really, the scenarios that really made you connect with the people on the stage, always came at the very end. And that's a very similar process, I think, for when people approach writing, especially when it comes to things like symbols and metaphors, and anything that requires originality. Because what happens is often people will write the very first thing that comes to their head. I've talked about this before. Like, the first thing that comes to your mind, you should try your best to ignore it. You should do your best to sort of throw that aside and wait and dig a little bit deeper. It's the really good metaphors, the really good symbols, the really good wordplay. It comes after you exhaust mentally like the first, 5 or 6 ideas. That's when that's when it starts to come. That's when like the really interesting turns of phrase come in there. And so if you're looking to improve your writing, I would tell you that if you're writing just the very first things that come to mind, if you're relying on what just automatically comes to your head and you put it on the page right away, you might notice that upon reviewing it, that your work doesn't necessarily stand out. It sounds fine, but it doesn't have that magic. It doesn't have that sort of creative wit, perhaps, that creative originality that you've probably seen in some works that you really, really enjoy. And the reason why is what comes to your head first is always the tired tropes and the tired cliches and all of the things you've seen 1,000 times before. Because you've seen it 1,000 times before, it's the first thing that you recall. The original stuff lies beneath that. It's the stuff that you haven't explored. And the human mind is something that tends to be very lazy. Just as a matter of like evolutionary survival, the shortest path to coming up with any solution is usually the one that your brain determines is the best, because it's the most efficient and the fastest way. It doesn't want to, your brain doesn't want to dig deep and figure out these complex problems. It doesn't want to come up with these complex and these original ideas. It just wants to go with what the first thing is, so that way you're not expending a whole bunch of energy. You're not spending a whole lot of time waiting about this. You're sort of getting it done and moving on. And so this video is, I guess, a plea in the sense that if you are trying to improve your writing, if you are attempting to make your sentences perhaps a little bit stronger, if you're trying to make just your metaphors, I mean, a little bit better, don't go with the first thing. Don't go with, the first turn of phrase. Like everyone's heard the person's eyes were blue like lake ice, or blue like ice, right? You've heard that 1,000 times. It's not very original. If you can get original, if you could say, blue, and I just, blue like lake ice. Okay, I just get it a second ago, but let's go with that. So the person's eyes are blue like lake ice. Again, not terribly original, but it's better than blue like ice, right? It's better than blue like the sky. It's a bit more original. You probably haven't necessarily heard it used that way. And then, but even blue like lake ice is not necessarily that good. It's not necessarily that original. You have to go deeper with that. You have to figure out, okay, what does the narrator know from reference? Does your narrator, if your narrator lives like in the Arctic, then blue like lake ice, or blue like ocean water, like deep ocean water, that tends to work a bit better because your character is from that region. It's a good recall to their personality, to your whoever your narrator might be. But even then, going further with that, so describing going deeper with describing their eyes, using a different comparison, one that's a bit more obscure, that will make the writing stronger. But it's not going to be the first thing that comes to your mind. It's not going to be the first thing that comes. I mean, when you're sitting there on the page and you're just hammering out away on the keyboard, it's not. It takes time just to sit there and think and go, okay, what should I come up with instead? And it's always later. The quality always comes later. It's always like after you've exhausted those first few ideas. The challenge in this, it's not difficult to just sit there and think about it. The challenge is that it takes time. You don't get a whole lot done. You're not cranking out, thousands of words based in a session probably if you're trying to think this deep. You're getting only a little bit, sort of a little bit done. That's kind of the trade-off. It's a slower process, but the quality of what you put out tends to be better. The words that you tend to come on the page tend to be a little stronger in a sense. And so this is really just a video just telling you that if you're trying to improve, a good technique, if you haven't tried it, is just to start to discard the first things that come to your mind, to really just to pick things that are maybe, your first fifth or sixth item that comes to your head, the first fifth or sixth comparison, not the first or second. It's not always simple. You might spend maybe even days trying to think up of a really good metaphor. If you get really deep with it, it's just the nature of writing itself. But if you can do it, you'll notice that your work is going to improve a lot in comparison to maybe where it might be right now.